It was late evening in the city. The streets were full of traffic, and the sound of rain mixed with car horns created a strange kind of rhythm. A taxi stopped near a small tea stall, its yellow paint dulled from years of work. Inside sat a man in his 40s, tired but calm. His name was Irfan. He had been driving since morning, trying to earn enough to pay for his children's school fees and a few bills waiting at home. Irfan wasn't the kind of man who talked much. He mostly listened. Over the years he had met thousands of passengers, some kind, some rude, and some completely silent. But every ride, he believed, carried its own small story. It was what made his long days feel a little less empty. As the rain got heavier, most people rushed to find shelter. Irfan sipped his cup of tea, waiting for another passenger. The road ahead glowed with reflections of neon lights. That's when he noticed someone standing a little ahead, a young woman drenched in rain, trying to cover her head with a thin scarf. She looked lost. One hand held a phone to her ear. The other clutched a small bag close to her chest. At first, Irfan didn't think much of it. People got stranded all the time in bad weather. But when he saw her wipe her face again and again, it became clear she wasn't just caught in the rain. She was crying. He started the engine and slowly drove closer. When his taxi stopped beside her, he lowered the window and called out gently, "Madam, do you need a ride somewhere?" The woman hesitated. Her eyes were red, her hair sticking to her face from the rain. She didn't answer at first, just looked around like she was searching for someone. After a few seconds, she shook her head. I don't have money right now," she said softly. Irfan smiled faintly. "Don't worry about that. You'll catch a cold if you keep standing here. Come, sit inside. The rain isn't stopping soon." There was a short pause. She looked at him carefully, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she nodded and stepped into the taxi. Her clothes were soaked, and her hands trembled slightly as she tried to close the door. For a while, they sat in silence. The sound of raindrops hitting the roof filled the space between them. Irfan adjusted the heater a little and handed her a small tissue box from the dashboard. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," and took one. After a few minutes, he asked gently, "Where should I take you?" She hesitated again. I don't really know," she said. "I was supposed to meet someone near the station, but my bag was stolen. My phone's almost dead. I don't know what to do." Her voice cracked slightly. Irfan could tell she was trying not to cry again. He didn't push her for details. He simply said, "Don't worry. We'll figure something out. There's a small cafe nearby where you can rest and make a call if you want. It's a safe place," she nodded weakly. He drove through the wet streets, the wipers beating rhythmically. The lights from the shops and cars flashed across her face, revealing a mixture of exhaustion and sadness. When they reached the cafe, Irfan parked the taxi and got out first. He opened the door for her and guided her to the entrance. Inside, the smell of coffee and freshly baked bread filled the air. The warmth of the place seemed to soften her expression a little. He asked her to sit down while he went to the counter. Without saying much, he ordered 2 cups of tea and a plate of biscuits. When he returned to the table, she was looking out the window, lost in thought. "Here, have some tea," he said quietly, setting the cup in front of her. "It helps when you're cold and tired." She looked at him with surprise. "You really don't have to do all this," she said. "You've already helped me enough." Irfan smiled again, the kind of smile that comes from habit rather than joy. "It's okay. Sometimes people need help. Tomorrow it could be me who needs it." The woman nodded, her eyes softening a little. She took a sip of tea, and for the first time since she got into the taxi, she looked slightly calmer. After a few moments, she spoke again, her voice low. "I came to Karachi for a job interview. I've been looking for work for months. I thought this was my chance. But after the interview, my bag got stolen. All my money, my ID, everything was inside. I tried calling my cousin, but she isn't answering. I don't even have enough left to go home." Her words hung heavy in the air. Irfan didn't interrupt. He simply listened. "I know I must look foolish," she said, forcing a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Crying on the street like that. I just didn't know what else to do." Irfan shook his head. "There's nothing foolish about that. Sometimes life just hits harder than we expect." She gave him a small, tired smile. "You're very kind. Most people would have just driven past." He shrugged. "Maybe. But if we all start ignoring people in trouble, what kind of world will we live in?" There was a brief silence after that. The rain outside was slowing down. and the cafe was almost empty now. Irfan took out some money from his wallet and pushed it gently across the table toward her. "Take this," he said. "You can pay me back later if you want or not at all. Use it to get home safely." She looked at the money, then at him, unsure what to say. "I can't take that," she whispered. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," Irfan replied. "You're someone who needs help. That's enough." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were different. Not from fear or sadness, but from gratitude. She took the money slowly, her fingers trembling. "Thank you," she said. "I don't know how to repay you." He smiled softly. "Just remember to help someone else one day. That'll be enough repayment." After finishing their tea, Irfan offered to drop her at the bus station. On the way, she told him a little more about her life. She had studied accounting but struggled to find work. Her parents lived in a small town, and she didn't want to worry them by telling them she had failed another interview. She had come to Karachi hoping for something better, but the day had turned into a nightmare. Irfan listened quietly, occasionally nodding. He didn't have much to say, but his silence was comforting. When they reached the station, she turned to him before getting out. "What's your name?" she asked. "Irfan," he replied simply. She smiled faintly. "I'll never forget this day, Irfan. I promise I'll return the favor somehow." He chuckled lightly. "You don't have to. Just take care of yourself. That's enough for me." She thanked him again and walked toward the terminal, disappearing into the crowd. Irfan sat there for a few moments, watching her until she was out of sight. Then he took a deep breath and started his car again. As he drove away, the rain finally stopped. The city looked washed and new, the lights reflecting gently on the wet roads. Irfan felt tired, but a quiet peace settled in his heart. It wasn't the first time he had helped someone, but something about this meeting felt different. He couldn't explain it, but deep down he felt that their paths had crossed for a reason. When he reached home that night, his wife asked why he was so late. He just smiled and said, "I gave someone a ride who needed it more than anyone else today." She didn't ask further, and he didn't explain. He lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling. Life for him had always been about surviving one day at a time. But that night he felt something shift. A small reminder that kindness still mattered, even in a world that often forgot it. He didn't know it yet, but that one simple act on a rainy evening would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. And somewhere in the city, the young woman sat on a bus heading home, holding the small amount of money he'd given her. She kept thinking about the quiet taxi driver with the kind eyes who had helped her when no one else did. She made a promise to herself right then, that if life ever gave her the chance, she would do something good for him in return. Neither of them knew that their lives had just become a part of the same story. It had been almost 6 months since that rainy night when Irfan helped the crying woman near the bus terminal. Life had gone back to its usual rhythm for him. Early mornings, long hours behind the wheel, and quiet evenings with his family. The days looked the same, one blending into another. But sometimes, when he drove past that cafe where they'd sat together, the memory came back like a gentle whisper. He would picture her sitting there, soaked in rain, holding the warm cup of tea, her face softening with relief. He never saw her again after that day, but he often wondered what happened to her. Did she find a job? Did she get home safely? He had no answers, only hope that she was doing better. Work, however, was not going well. The city's traffic was getting worse, fuel prices were rising, and passengers had become fewer. Some days, Irfan barely earned enough to cover his fuel expenses. Still, he kept driving. He had a family to feed, and giving up wasn't an option. One hot afternoon, he parked his taxi near a shopping area to wait for passengers. The sun glared off the windshields, and the air felt heavy. He turned on the fan and leaned back, closing his eyes for a few minutes. That's when he heard a knock on the window. He opened his eyes to see an elderly man standing there with a suitcase. "Can you take me to the hospital?" the man asked in a tired voice. "Of course," Irfan said, quickly straightening up. He helped the man load his bag and drove off. The man was quiet during the ride, speaking only to give directions. When they reached the hospital, he asked Irfan to wait while he went inside. It took almost an hour, but Irfan didn't mind. He knew the man might need a ride back. When the old man returned, he looked pale and worried. He sat back in the taxi and sighed deeply. "My wife's not well," he murmured. "I've been coming here for weeks, but nothing's improving. Irfan nodded with quiet sympathy. "May God give her health," he said softly. The man smiled weakly. "You're kind. Not many drivers even wait this long. Most would have left." Irfan shook his head. "Some things are more important than time, sir." The old man's eyes softened at his words. Before getting out, he handed Irfan a small note and said, "Here, take this. You've earned it." It was more money than Irfan usually got for such a short trip. He tried to refuse, but the man insisted. "Keep it," the man said. "The world needs more people like you." As Irfan drove away, he felt a quiet warmth spread through him. Maybe kindness did have a way of returning, he thought, even in small ways. Days turned into weeks, and life moved on. Then one evening, when Irfan was driving through the city center, his phone rang. It was a strange number. He almost ignored it, thinking it might be another wrong call, but something made him answer. "Hello?" A woman's voice came through, polite but firm. "Is this Irfan, the taxi driver?" "Yes," he replied cautiously. "My name is Nadia," she said. "You helped me a few months ago during a heavy rain." "You might not remember me." Irfan sat up straighter. The name felt familiar, but he didn't expect to ever hear it again. "Ah, yes," he said slowly. "I remember. Are you all right?" "I'm doing much better now," she said, her tone warm with gratitude. "Actually, I've been trying to find you. You left quite an impression that night." Irfan chuckled softly. "I'm glad to hear that. I only did what anyone should do." "Not everyone would have," she replied. "Anyway, I'd like to meet you if that's okay. There's something I want to give you." He hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. "That's kind of you, but it's not necessary," he said. "Please," she insisted gently. "It's important to me. I'll be at the cafe near Sadar tomorrow evening." "Can you come?" Irfan agreed, though he didn't really expect anything. He was used to people saying they'd return a favor but never seeing them again. Still, something about her tone felt sincere. The next evening, after dropping off his last passenger, he cleaned the taxi, straightened his shirt, and went to the cafe. The same warm smell of tea and bread filled the air, just like that rainy night. He looked around, wondering if she'd really show up. Then he saw her. She was sitting near the window, smiling as soon as she spotted him. She looked different now, more confident, neatly dressed, and brighter somehow. As he approached, she stood up and extended her hand. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "Please sit." He smiled and took the seat across from her. "It's good to see you again," he said. "You look..." "Well, I am," she replied. "Thanks to people like you." They talked for a while. She told him how after that night she'd managed to get home safely. A few days later, she received a call from another company where she had applied earlier. They offered her a position as an assistant accountant. "It was like life gave me a second chance," she said. "And I think your kindness gave me the strength to face things again." Irfan listened quietly, genuinely happy for her. "That's good," he said. "You worked hard for it. You deserve it." She smiled and shook her head. "You know, that night I was ready to give up. I thought maybe I didn't belong in this city. But then you showed up, a complete stranger who didn't ask for anything in return. It changed how I looked at people. I realized that sometimes hope comes in the simplest forms." Her words touched him deeply. He didn't know what to say. For years he had helped people without expecting anything, but hearing how much it mattered to someone made it feel different. Then she opened her bag and took out an envelope. "This is for you," she said, sliding it across the table. Irfan frowned. "What's this?" "Please just take it," she insisted. "It's a small thank you. I saved up a bit from my salary. I wanted to repay the money you gave me that day, and a little extra for all your kindness." He looked down at the envelope, unsure whether to accept it. "You really don't have to," he said. "I never helped you expecting something back." "I know," she said softly. "That's exactly why I want you to take it." After a long pause, he nodded and accepted it quietly. "Thank you," he said simply. They sat for a while longer, talking about life, work, and the little struggles that everyone faced. Irfan found her easy to talk to. She had a warmth that made people comfortable. Before leaving, she said, "If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out." "I mean it," he smiled politely. "I appreciate that. And I'm really happy to see you doing well." As she walked away, Irfan watched her go, feeling both happy and humbled. He never thought that one small act of kindness would come back to him like this. But life had more surprises waiting. A few months later, Irfan's luck began to turn again. His old taxi started breaking down often and repairs became too costly. The hospital bills for his son's illness kept growing. He was falling behind on rent and every day felt heavier than the last. He tried to stay positive, but one evening as he sat alone in the taxi stand, looking at the half-empty fuel tank, the weight of everything hit him. He had always believed that good things come to those who do good. But now he wasn't so sure. He looked up at the sky, whispering to himself, maybe kindness isn't enough in this world anymore. At that moment, his phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number. He almost didn't pick up, but something told him to answer. Hello? Mr. Irfan? A voice said. This is from Al Faisal Company. We received your application for a driver's position. Could you come in tomorrow morning for an interview? Irfan froze. He hadn't even remembered applying for that job. It must have been months ago. Yes, of course, he replied quickly. As he hung up, he sat there quietly, a faint smile appearing on his tired face. Maybe, just maybe, life was giving him another chance too. He didn't know it yet, but the call he had just received would change everything. The next morning, Irfan woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely risen, and the city outside was still quiet. He got ready carefully, ironed his old shirt, polished his worn-out shoes, and combed his hair. He didn't have many clothes that looked professional, but he made sure he looked neat and clean. His wife watched him from the doorway. Where are you going so early? She asked softly, still half asleep. There's a job interview, he said, buttoning his shirt. A company called Al Faisal. They need a driver. Maybe it's time I stopped depending on the taxi. She nodded, trying to sound hopeful. You'll do well, I'm sure. You always do your work honestly. He smiled faintly. Let's hope honesty is still valued. After a small breakfast of tea and bread, he left home, carrying his documents in a small plastic folder. The streets were beginning to fill with traffic, the city waking up slowly. As he waited for the bus, a light breeze passed by, carrying the familiar smell of morning food stalls, fresh parathas and tea. It made him think of all the mornings he'd spent behind the wheel of his taxi, chasing fares just to make it through the day. The bus ride was long, but Irfan didn't mind. He looked out the window, thinking quietly about his life. The years had passed quickly. He had seen many ups and downs, but lately, the downs seemed to outnumber everything else. His taxi was barely running, his son's health was still fragile, and the debts were slowly piling up. This interview felt like a small lifeline in a sea of worries. When he reached the company building, he was impressed. It was tall and modern, with glass doors and clean floors. He felt a bit out of place as he walked inside, but he straightened his shoulders and went to the reception. Good morning, he said politely. I'm here for the driver interview. The receptionist checked a list and nodded. Yes, please wait. Someone will call you soon. He sat down in the waiting area, his hands folded on his lap. Several other men were waiting too, most younger and better dressed. Irfan felt a flicker of nervousness but tried to stay calm. He had experience, years of it, and he knew he could do the job well. After nearly half an hour, his name was called. Mr. Irfan, please come in. He stood up, took a deep breath, and walked into the office. The air inside was cool and the smell of coffee lingered. Behind a large desk sat a woman, looking through some papers. When she looked up, Irfan froze for a moment. It was her, Nadia. For a few seconds, he couldn't find his voice. She looked completely different, confident, dressed professionally with a calm smile on her face. She stood up immediately when she recognized him. Irfan, she said warmly. I can't believe it's really you. He blinked in surprise. You work here? She nodded, smiling. More than that. I manage this department. When your name came up on the interview list, I thought it couldn't be a coincidence. He didn't know what to say. The room suddenly felt brighter. Please sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. It's been a long time. He sat down slowly. I didn't expect to see you here, he admitted. Neither did I, she said. But I'm glad it happened. How have you been? He hesitated. Not great, honestly, he said softly. The taxi's in bad shape. My son's been sick. Work's been slow. That's why I applied here. I just need something stable. Nadia listened carefully, her expression turning thoughtful. I'm sorry to hear that, she said gently. You've always been a hard-working person. You deserve better. There was a moment of silence between them, comfortable yet heavy with unspoken gratitude. Then she smiled again. Well, let's make this official. You're here for the driver's position, right? He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Good, she said, playfully raising an eyebrow. Then I'll have to ask you some formal questions or the HR department will say I didn't do my job. Irfan chuckled nervously. Ask away. The interview was simple. She asked about his driving experience, his past work, and his ability to handle long routes. Irfan answered honestly. When it ended, she leaned back and said, I'll be honest with you, Irfan, you're more than qualified. The job is yours if you want it. He blinked, unsure he heard right. Just like that? She nodded. Just like that. I trust you. And I owe you more than you realize. Irfan looked down, emotion catching in his throat. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. That night I just did what anyone would have done. She smiled kindly. Maybe, but that night changed my life. I was at my lowest point, and your kindness reminded me that there's still goodness in people. I wouldn't be here today if you hadn't stopped to help me. Her words hit him deeply. He had never thought that something so small could leave such a mark on someone's life. Nadia continued. The salary is better than average, and you'll get medical coverage too. I know you mentioned your son is unwell. This might help. He felt his eyes sting, but he quickly blinked them clear. Thank you, he said softly. You don't know what this means to me. I think I do, she said. You helped me when you had nothing to gain. Let me help you now. That's how life should work. When Irfan left the office, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. The air outside seemed fresher, the sky brighter. He took a deep breath and smiled quietly to himself. That evening, when he returned home, his wife noticed the change immediately. What happened? She asked. You look different. He sat down, still smiling. I got the job, he said. And you won't believe who gave it to me. When he told her the story, she looked at him in amazement. So the same woman you helped months ago, she's your boss now? He nodded, still half in disbelief. It feels like a dream. Like fate brought it full circle. For the first time in a long while, hope returned to their small home. The children laughed louder that night, the dinner tasted better, and even the air felt lighter. But Irfan's journey wasn't suddenly free of struggle. Adjusting to the new job came with challenges. The company was strict, the routes were long, and the expectations were high. He often worked late hours, sometimes driving through the night to deliver important clients safely. But he didn't complain. Every time he felt tired, he reminded himself how far he had come. Still, some nights were hard. His son's health continued to worry him. The hospital bills kept arriving, and though his new job helped, it wasn't always enough. Irfan sometimes found himself sitting alone in the driver's seat after his shift, staring at the quiet city lights, wondering if things would ever truly get better. One night, as he drove a senior manager home from the airport, the man began complaining about his life, about stress, work pressure, and missing vacations. Irfan listened silently as he always did. When they reached the destination, the man sighed and said, You're lucky, you know. You drivers have simple lives. No worries, no tension. Irfan smiled faintly, though his heart ached a little. Everyone carries their own kind of struggle, sir, he said. Some you can see, some you can't. The man looked at him for a moment, then nodded quietly, realizing there was truth in his words. When Irfan returned to the company that night, he saw Nadia still working at her desk. Most people had left hours ago. He stopped by the door and said softly, You should go home. It's late. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. You sound like an old friend now. Maybe I am, he said, smiling back. There was warmth in that moment, an unspoken bond formed not by luck, but by shared humanity. Neither of them knew it yet. But life was about to test that bond in a way neither could expect. For now, Irfan drove home through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting in his mirrors. He felt tired but at peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was living with purpose. The rain started again that night, soft and steady, like the one on the evening they first met. And as it fell, Irfan whispered to himself, Maybe kindness really does come back. Weeks passed and Irfan slowly settled into his new job. He had his own uniform now, a company car and fixed working hours. It was different from his old taxi life. There were no random passengers, no endless waiting on the roadside, and no bargaining over fares. For the first time in years, he had a routine and a little peace of mind. Every morning, he would reach the office early, clean the car, check the tires, and wait for the day's schedule. He drove company executives to meetings, picked up guests from the airport, and sometimes dropped staff home after work. His work was honest, and people respected him for his reliability. But the person who trusted him the most was Nadia. She often requested him for her own travel needs, business meetings, late work nights, or even weekend errands. It wasn't just about comfort. She said she felt safe when Irfan was driving. Over time, they talked more. Their conversations were light, sometimes about work, sometimes about life. Irfan learned that she lived alone in a small apartment and had been supporting her younger sister through university. She had worked her way up through the company, often skipping her own comfort to help others. One evening, as Irfan waited for her outside the office, she came out looking tired. "You must be hungry," he said kindly. "You've been working since morning," she smiled wearily. "I'll eat once I get home. You should rest too," he shook his head. "I'm used to long hours, but you working this much isn't healthy," she laughed softly. "You sound like my older brother." "I'll take that as a compliment," he said with a grin. That night, on the drive home, the roads were quiet. The streetlights cast soft reflections on the windshield. After a long silence, Nadia said quietly, "You know, Irfan, that night when you helped me, I was completely lost. I thought I'd failed in life. But you made me believe again. It's strange how one small moment can change everything." Irfan didn't reply immediately. He was focused on the road, but his heart was listening. "Sometimes," he said finally, "we meet people not by chance, but because we need to." "Maybe I was just meant to stop that night." She smiled softly. "Maybe we both were." The days kept passing, and their bond grew stronger, not in a romantic way, but through mutual respect, like family who had found each other unexpectedly. Then, one afternoon, Irfan received a phone call that shook his world. His wife called from home, her voice trembling. "Irfan, the doctor says our son needs surgery soon. They can't delay it any longer." He felt his chest tighten. "How much will it cost?" he asked. She hesitated. "More than we can afford. Around 2 lakh rupees. For a few seconds, Irfan said nothing. He looked out at the busy road, cars passing by, people rushing to places, while his own world suddenly felt like it had stopped. "Don't worry," he said finally, though he didn't know how he'd manage. "We'll figure it out." That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking of how to arrange the money. He had some savings, but not nearly enough. He considered selling his taxi, even though it was barely worth anything now. The thought of borrowing money scared him. Debts had broken many families he knew. The next day at work, he looked exhausted. Nadia noticed immediately. "You look unwell," she said with concern. "Are you all right?" He hesitated, but then sighed. "It's my son. He needs surgery. I'm trying to arrange money for it," she frowned. "How much do you need?" He shook his head quickly. "Please don't worry about it. I'll manage somehow." But she didn't let it go. Later that evening, after he dropped her home, she handed him an envelope. "Take this," she said softly. "It's a loan, not charity. You can return it when you can." He looked at the envelope, startled. "No, ma'am, I can't take your money. You've already done too much for me." Nadia crossed her arms lightly. "Irfan, you helped me when I was a stranger. You didn't think twice. Now it's my turn. Don't refuse this. It's not about money. It's about doing the right thing." Her words echoed his own from that rainy night months ago. He remembered saying almost the same thing to her. His throat tightened, and after a long silence, he nodded slowly. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll never forget this." With her help and a small loan from a friend, Irfan managed to get his son's surgery done. The operation went well, and his son began to recover quickly. It was a tough few weeks, but everything eventually settled. One evening, after visiting his son in the hospital, Irfan stopped by the company building to pick up some files for Nadia. She had asked him to bring them to her home since she was working late. When he reached her apartment, the door was half open. He knocked gently. "Ma'am, it's me. I brought the documents." "Come in," she called from inside. He entered, placing the folder on the table. The small apartment was neatly kept with books and files everywhere. She was sitting by the window, her laptop open, but her face looked tired. "You work too much," he said with a small smile. She chuckled. "Someone has to keep the company running." Then her smile faded slightly. You know, Irfan, when I started working here, I promised myself I'd never let anyone feel as helpless as I did that night. That's why I try to help whenever I can. He nodded thoughtfully. You've done more than enough for me already. She shook her head. No, Irfan, you gave me something that night money couldn't buy, hope. I'm just returning it in small pieces. Her words stayed with him long after he left. A few days later, there was an announcement at work. The company's senior management was changing and a new director was coming in. Everyone was nervous about how things might shift. But Nadia seemed unusually calm. During the next week, rumors spread that some staff might lose their jobs in restructuring. Irfan worried silently. He had only just started rebuilding his life. He couldn't afford to lose this job now. Finally, one afternoon, all staff were called for a meeting. The new director arrived, a man in his 50s with a sharp suit and serious expression. He introduced himself, then began talking about company changes. Irfan stood at the back listening quietly. After the meeting ended, Nadia walked up to the director and spoke with him privately. From the corner of his eye, Irfan could see her gesturing toward him. The director turned, looked at Irfan, and nodded. Later that day, Nadia called him into her office. You don't have to worry about your job, she said. I spoke to the director. He's agreed to keep you on permanently. You'll also get a raise next month. Irfan blinked in surprise. But why would he agree so easily? She smiled almost shyly. Because he's my uncle. He trusts my judgment, he laughed softly in disbelief. So all this time you were connected to the higher management? She nodded. But it's not about that. You earned this, Irfan. You've been honest, hardworking, and kind. That's rare these days. For the first time, Irfan didn't know what to say. Everything, the rainy night, the cafe, the loan, the job, suddenly connected in his mind like pieces of a puzzle. Every small moment, every act of kindness had led him here. He realized something powerful then. Nothing in life truly disappears. Every good deed leaves a mark somewhere waiting for the right moment to return. That night as he drove home, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner. He looked out the window at the glowing lights of the city and smiled. When he reached home, his son was sitting up in bed, smiling weakly. Papa, the doctor says I'll be fine soon. Irfan sat beside him, his heart full. I told you everything works out if we keep faith. As his son drifted to sleep, Irfan looked up at the ceiling, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude for life, for fate, and for the strangers who become blessings. He finally understood that sometimes the universe sends people into your life not by accident, but by design. And when you do something good without expecting anything back, life has a way of returning it, just when you need it most. Months passed, and Irfan's life slowly began to take a new shape. His son had fully recovered, running around the house again, laughing like any healthy child. His wife looked at him with quiet pride, often saying, You've worked hard, Irfan. God has finally smiled on us. He didn't see it as luck, though. He saw it as kindness returned. The same kindness he had once shown to a stranger in the rain had come back to him in ways he could never have imagined. His job at the company had become permanent now. The staff respected him, not just because of his work, but because of the calmness and honesty he carried everywhere. He was no longer just a driver. He was someone people turned to for advice or small help. He'd often bring tea for the office security guard, share his lunch with a cleaner, or stay a bit late to drop someone home safely. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because it felt right. One morning, as he parked the car in front of the building, he saw Nadia coming toward him. She was smiling, not the tired, polite smile she used to wear, but a peaceful one. Good morning, she said cheerfully. Good morning, ma'am, he replied, nodding respectfully. Come, sit with me for a minute, she said, pointing to a bench under a tree near the parking lot. They sat quietly for a moment, watching people rushing to work, the sound of city life buzzing around them. Irfan, she began softly, I wanted to tell you something. I've been offered a position abroad. It's a big opportunity, and I'll be leaving next month. He looked at her, surprised. That's wonderful news, ma'am. You deserve it, she smiled gently. Thank you. But before I go, I wanted to say, you've reminded me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that comes from money or power, but from kindness and patience. You've helped me more than you'll ever realize. Irfan was silent for a moment. You've helped me too, ma'am. More than I could ever repay. She shook her head. No repayment needed. That night you stopped your taxi for me. You changed my life's direction. Maybe we were both meant to meet, just to remind each other that goodness still exists." Her words filled the air like quiet music. After a pause, she took out a small box from her bag and handed it to him. "Before I go, I want you to have this." He opened it carefully. Inside was a wristwatch, simple but elegant with a note tucked beneath it. The note said, "For the man who reminded me that even strangers can become angels in disguise." He stared at it, unable to speak. "Ma'am, I can't accept this," but she stopped him gently. "Please, it's just a small token. Every time you look at it, I want you to remember that one kind act can change everything." His eyes grew moist. He nodded slowly. "Thank you. I'll treasure it." From that day onward, the watch became more than just a piece of time. It was a reminder of that rainy night, of every choice that had led him to this moment. When Nadia left for her new job, the office felt a little emptier, but Irfan carried her words with him. He continued to drive, work, and help people in small ways every day. One evening, a young man stopped his taxi near the old cafe where it had all begun. He was holding a small bouquet of flowers and looked lost. "Bye, can you take me to the hospital near City Road?" he asked, his voice shaky. "Of course," Irfan said gently. As they drove, he noticed the man was crying silently. Irfan didn't ask at first. He knew sometimes people just needed space. But after a while, he said softly, "Whatever's wrong, son. Just remember, nothing stays dark forever." The young man looked up, surprised. "My mother's sick. I don't know if she'll make it." Irfan's heart ached. "I understand," he said. "But trust me, miracles happen. Maybe not the way we expect, but they happen." When they reached the hospital, the young man realized he didn't have enough cash. He began to panic. "I'm so sorry, I thought I had my wallet." Irfan waved his hand calmly. "Don't worry about it. Go to your mother. That's more important right now." The young man looked at him with tears in his eyes. "Thank you. I'll never forget this." As he ran toward the hospital entrance, Irfan sat quietly behind the wheel, watching. A small smile touched his lips. He didn't know who that young man was, and maybe he'd never see him again. But that didn't matter, because Irfan had learned something life-changing, that kindness doesn't always circle back directly. Sometimes it moves forward, passing from one heart to another like a chain of invisible light. Later that night, he parked his car and walked home through the quiet streets. The city was alive with distant sounds, laughter, traffic, the hum of late-night life. He looked up at the dark sky, stars barely visible behind the clouds. He thought about all the people he'd met, the angry passengers, the kind ones, the quiet ones, and the broken ones. Each of them had left something behind, a small story that became part of his own. When he reached home, his wife was waiting by the door. "You're late," she said with a gentle smile. He handed her a small bag of sweets. "Someone at work gave these. Let's have some tea." As they sat together, his son joined them, laughing about something he saw at school. The house was small, but it was filled with warmth. Irfan looked around the room, his wife's smile, his son's laughter, the clock ticking softly on the wall. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. And peace, he realized, was the real luxury. He looked at the watch on his wrist. It ticked softly, its hands moving in quiet rhythm. He thought about Nadia, wherever she was now, probably busy in some new city, meeting new people, touching more lives the same way she had touched his. Maybe, he thought, that's how life was meant to be. We cross paths with people not by accident, but because we're meant to leave something behind. A little hope, a little courage, a little kindness. Years later, when Irfan became an old man with graying hair and slower steps, he was still driving. Not because he had to, but because he loved meeting people. Sometimes passengers asked about the watch he wore. He would smile and say, "It's from someone who taught me that good people still exist." Then he'd add, almost to himself, "And if you ever get the chance to help someone, don't think twice. Just do it. You never know how deeply it might matter." One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and gold, Irfan parked his taxi by the same street where it had all begun, the one where he'd once stopped for a crying woman in the rain. The cafe was still there, though the sign was new and brighter. He sat quietly, watching people rush by, holding umbrellas as rain began to fall again. He closed his eyes and smiled. It all started right here, he whispered. The rain fell softly on the roof of his car, and in that gentle sound he felt a deep peace. Life had come full circle, because years ago he had stopped to help a stranger, and without even knowing it, that small act had rewritten his entire life story. And maybe somewhere out there someone else was now stopping to help another stranger, keeping that chain of kindness alive, just as it had once begun on a rainy night with a taxi driver and a crying woman. Years went by. Seasons changed, people came and went, but Irfan remained the same gentle soul who believed in small acts of goodness. His face had more wrinkles now. His hair was silver and his taxi had seen countless journeys. Yet every line on his face told a story. Stories of laughter, tears, strangers, and unexpected kindness. He had become something of a local legend among regular passengers. People called him Baba Irfan, the kind-hearted driver. Children loved him, old people trusted him, and even the busy office workers who rarely smiled found comfort in his calm voice. Every morning, he started his day the same way, with a quiet prayer, a cup of tea, and a quick check of his taxi. It wasn't the newest car on the road, but it was clean and smelled faintly of cardamom from his daily tea. He always said, "If you keep your car clean, your day starts clean too." He still wore the same wristwatch Nadia had given him years ago. It was slightly scratched now, but it worked perfectly. Each tick of the clock reminded him of that rainy night, the moment that changed everything. Sometimes, while waiting at a red light, he'd glance at the watch and smile softly, as if remembering a secret between him and fate. Life had given him many blessings since then. His son had grown up, completed his studies, and now worked as an engineer in another city. His wife spent most days gardening or visiting neighbors. They had built a small but happy life, not filled with riches, but with peace and gratitude. One winter afternoon, while Irfan waited near a shopping mall for a passenger, he noticed a woman trying to call for a taxi. She was holding a little girl in her arms and looked worried. It reminded him of that night years ago when he had stopped for Nadia. Without thinking twice, he rolled down his window. "Madam, need a ride?" he asked kindly. The woman nodded, looking relieved. "Yes, please. My daughter's not feeling well. I need to get to the hospital. Come, sit. Don't worry, we'll get there quickly," he said, helping her into the back seat. As he drove through traffic, the little girl whimpered softly. Irfan tried to distract her by pointing out lights and trees. "See those pretty lights? They look like stars on Earth," he said gently. The girl blinked at him, weakly smiling. "Stars on Earth?" she whispered. Her mother looked at him gratefully. "Thank you, Uncle. I was so scared. I didn't know if anyone would stop." He smiled through the rearview mirror. Sometimes help comes when you least expect it. After reaching the hospital, the woman tried to pay him, but he refused. No, keep it. Use it for her medicine. That's more important," she insisted, but he gently shook his head. "Just say a prayer for her health." "That's enough." Tears filled her eyes. "May God bless you. People like you keep this world kind." He smiled, waved her goodbye, and drove off slowly. The city lights flickered outside, and a soft warmth spread in his heart. That night, when he returned home, his wife noticed the glow on his face. "You look happy," she said. He nodded. "I just helped a mother and her sick child get to the hospital." "It reminded me of old times," she smiled knowingly. "Still helping people, Irfan?" He chuckled. "If I stop, what else will I do? Helping others keeps my heart young." Later that evening, while having dinner, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Curious, he opened it. "Hello, Uncle Irfan, this is Nadia." He blinked in surprise. It had been years since they last spoke. He quickly replied, "Madam, how are you?" "It's been so long." Her message came back almost instantly. "I'm in the city for a short visit. I'd love to see you if you're free tomorrow." He smiled wide. "Of course. Tell me where to pick you up." The next afternoon, Irfan parked outside a cafe, the very same one where they had first met years ago. The signboard was new and the place looked brighter, but the corner table by the window was still there. He waited for a few minutes, and then she walked in. Nadia looked older but radiant, wearing a soft smile and holding a cup of coffee. "I can't believe you're still driving," she said, amazed. He laughed warmly. "And I can't believe you remembered me. How could I forget?" she said softly. "You're the reason I got through one of the hardest nights of my life." They sat for hours, talking like old friends. She told him about her life abroad, how she'd started her own company, mentored young people, and even set up a small charity fund to help struggling families. "I named it after my mother," she said, smiling. "But in my heart I always remember you. You inspired the whole idea, Irfan." He looked down, his eyes glistening. "Me, I only stopped to help." "Exactly," she said. "That's the point. You didn't do it for reward or recognition. You did it because it was right. That's what kindness truly is." As they talked, time seemed to slow down. The cafe grew busier, the sky outside began to dim, and rain started tapping gently against the windows. Just like that first night. Nadia looked out at the rain and said softly, "Funny how it always rains when something important happens in our lives." Irfan chuckled. "Maybe the rain remembers too." They shared a quiet laugh, both lost in memories. Before leaving, Nadia handed him a small envelope. "Please don't refuse," she said quickly when he tried to protest. "It's not money. It's an invitation." He opened it slowly. It was an official-looking card with elegant writing. "Community Kindness Award Ceremony." She smiled. "Our foundation is honoring people who've made a difference through simple acts of goodness. You're one of them, Irfan. You've touched more lives than you realize." He looked up, speechless. "Me? But I haven't done anything big." She shook her head gently. "You've done the biggest thing. You reminded people that kindness still exists." The next week, Irfan stood on a small stage in front of a crowd of strangers. His old taxi parked beside the hall, shining under the lights. He wore his best clothes and the same watch he'd kept all these years. When his name was called, he stepped up slowly, hands trembling slightly. People clapped as Nadia handed him a small plaque engraved with his name. Cameras flashed, but Irfan's eyes were misty. He took the microphone and spoke softly. "I'm not used to speeches," he said, smiling nervously. "I'm just a driver. But if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that kindness never goes to waste. You might forget the faces you help, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." He paused for a moment, looking at Nadia. "Years ago, I stopped for someone crying in the rain. I didn't know she'd change my life. But that's how kindness works. It finds its way back to you, sometimes when you least expect it." The audience was silent, listening closely. He ended softly. "If every person helped just one other person without asking for anything in return, the world would be a different place." "I'm living proof of that." The hall filled with applause. Nadia smiled proudly, tears in her eyes. That night after the ceremony, Irfan stood outside under the open sky. It had stopped raining. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint smell of wet earth. He looked up at the stars, bright, countless, peaceful, and whispered, "Thank you." He wasn't sure if he was thanking God, fate, or the people who had crossed his path. Maybe all of them. As he got back into his taxi, he placed the award gently on the seat beside him, looked at his watch, and smiled. The hands kept ticking, steady and sure, a reminder that time moves forward. But goodness never fades. When he started the engine and drove away, the city lights reflected on the windshield like tiny stars, just like that little girl had said, "Stars on Earth." And maybe she was right, because people like Irfan, through their quiet, everyday kindness, really did make this world shine a little brighter.